I will say that there's no shortage of advisors or mentors or people who want to give you their 2 cents. And so you have to be very judicious about, what you pick and what you internalize. But I'm very thankful for that because I think otherwise it would have been a very difficult and uphill battle to go through. And it's not easy because there are some very high highs and low lows of entrepreneurship. And some days you're like, is this going to work? And some days you're like, we're going to be the greatest company in the world. So, and you have to, you have to ride that wave and you have to support your team through those things as well. So I'm grateful on both ends, both to receive mentorship and also to provide mentorship to members of our team as well, so that we can come full circle and try to do our best with what it is that we're doing.
From laboccupier.com, welcome to NGBiLab, Canada's life sciences startup podcast. Hi, I'm Jim Wilson, and my guest today is Dr. Nardin Samuel, who is a resident physician in neurology at the University of Toronto and co-founder and CEO of Cove Neurosciences. Nardin and her team are building a precision neuroscience company focused on improving how we understand the human brain. The platform developed by Cove Neurosciences is helping translate complex brain data into meaningful insights that can accelerate research, de-risk clinical trials, and ultimately improve outcomes for patients with neurological disorders. Before we get to our conversation with Nardin, we'd like to let you know this podcast is part of Next Great Big Ideas, Canada's Life Sciences Summit. For details, please check out nextgreatbigideas.com. This episode of NGBiLab was recorded in April 2025. Our guest today is Nardin Samuel, who is resident physician in the Department of Medicine, Division of Neurology at the University of Toronto, and co-founder of Cove Neurosciences. Nardin, welcome to NGBiLab.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm looking forward to our discussion. You and Dr. Irene Hampson co-founded the company in 2023. How did you and she get together, and where did the idea for the company come up?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question. And I would say it was very serendipitous. We got together actually because it was very organic. We were working together in the same research lab. She was doing her PhD studies and I was doing a postdoctoral research fellowship at Toronto Western Hospital in the Neuroscience Research Institute there. And we were working on fundamental neurophysiology, both in terms of measuring brain function and looking at various disease states. And we worked very well together in the research setting, but we had some challenges. So one of the main challenges that we had actually was in accurate and rapid analysis or analytics of our data. For me, that was very salient because I had to go back to my clinical training. Also, we were doing things in a way that I felt was taking up a significant proportion of our time and limiting our ability to expand our projects. So we actually applied for a grant to help us develop a software tool to improve the analysis of the data that we were looking at. And this was actually the window to a commercialization opportunity that neither of us had anticipated or even thought about. And we realized that if we actually build this platform, it can form the basis of a product that we could then market to other users that might need a tool to analyze their brain data.
Sorry, really you were just trying to solve your problem and it turned into an entrepreneurial journey.
Something like that, yes.
So serendipity absolutely played a role. So I don't have a science background, and I need you to dumb this down for me. It's a data platform that you've invented that allows for faster and better analytics, and it's specifically focused in neurosciences.
That's correct. I mean, essentially, in very simple terms, how can we measure what's going on in the brain? And I think that's something that is very relevant in the clinical setting and in the research setting. We have these tools to look at the brain, for example, MRI tools, or ways to measure how the brain conducts electricity, which is its language of function, how the brain actually works, how the different parts of the brain communicate with each other. There's just so much data, and this data is inherently very complex. So how can we actually take that data and translate it into something that gives us a window of insight into what's happening in the human brain in a given disease or following administration of a particular medication or an intervention. So really allowing us to take that data and better understand the function of the human brain.
And it was just a conversation that morphed from, we're working well together, what we're working on other people would need. And do you remember the moment where you looked at one another and went, hey, I got an idea?
Yeah, it was actually a very big turning point. We didn't look at each other directly because we were on Zoom because it was like just before midnight and we're
Right?
still
Yeah, it
trying
was
to
a
analyze.
pandemic.
Like, this is very inefficient. But yeah, and I think it was really that grant opportunity that was a huge turning point for us. Also, we don't have a business background. And so I was thinking, do I have to go back to school and get an MBA? We've both already been in school for like, almost 3 decades combined. And it's such a huge learning curve. But I think we were both fortunate because we're both very passionate about innovation and about understanding the human brain. And this was something that was in some ways non-traditional for trainees like ourselves. So we were both trainees in the MD PhD program at the University of Toronto, which is a clinician scientist training program. And this was almost like a very non-traditional mechanism for us to take our passion for innovation and scale that influence even beyond the academic setting. So create something that could then have an impact beyond us publishing papers and presenting it to other fellow academics at conferences, but actually put it into the hands of either researchers in the pharmaceutical sector or in other areas where they can actually utilize this tool in a meaningful way.
So you had the grant that helped kick off the company, but other than the grant, were you bootstrapping from day one, or did you have
Yes.
other investors?
Yeah, we do now. We're a few years in now, and so we have external investment as well. But I would say we really tried to push the boundaries of how long we could be bootstrapping for, and that was very important to us because we were very lean. We started with just the two of us, and the team actually grew very rapidly because by virtue of our roles at the University of Toronto, we were actually able to offer internship opportunities, some of which were
Okay.
actually paid through various platforms and programs within the University of Toronto. And so we were able to hire interns from the Faculty of Engineering and business and arts and science as well. And that helped us grow the team. And then in turn, a number of people from that core group actually continued with us until now. And what we were doing is not very capital intensive either. And so we could actually function in a very lean manner. We had additional small grants and probably about a year in, we started to have a very small amount of revenue come in that we could then reinvest back into the business and help us grow. And then we sort of reached a critical point about 6 to 8 months ago where we needed to raise additional capital in order to kind of take our growth from a gradual linear growth into maybe something a bit more accelerated. And so here we are.
Hi, it's Jim. When we come back, Nardin talks about how Cove Neurosciences grew from a small team into a company with a multidisciplinary group of scientists, developers, and business minds all working towards the same goal. Stay tuned. I'm Jim Wilson, and you're listening to NGBiLab, Canada's Life Sciences Startup Podcast. One of the goals of this podcast is to shine a light on startup founders who are creating the next generation of companies in Canadian life sciences. We have listeners in every Canadian province across the United States and in 55 countries. Our audience is growing, and if you'd like to become a sponsor, please send us an email. My contact information is included at the end of today's show, and we look forward to hearing from you. Let's get back to our conversation. Welcome back. It's Jim Wilson, and my guest today is Dr. Nardin Samuel of Cove Neurosciences in Toronto. So, how large is your team now?
So our team is still quite sizable. However, the core team that does not include interns includes myself and Irene, who's my co-founder. We now also have a full-time chief data scientist and our chief commercial officer, Dr. Leaf Samatas. Leaf he started with us a few months after we started the company. So he's been with us for some time as well. And then on the development side, we also have a software developer and an EEG scientist. That's our core team. And then we also have two business analysts that work with us as well. And when it comes to working with other interns, we sort of stratify the team into three groups. The first is the software development group. The second is the business development group and commercialization group. And the third is focused on neuroscience research and development, really taking what we're doing and doing additional research to sort of identify new problems and apply what we've built so far into different external data sets as well.
So, would your target client be a research hospital or a university?
Yeah, that's a very good question because not only is that what investors first ask us, they're like, well, who are you selling this to? And why, who
Right.
has this
Yeah.
problem? And why do you need? And so initially, the answer to your question is yes. We thought, well, who would need this other than people like us, other researchers and universities that are doing this kind of research. And although that was conceptually our initial target, we realized from a market perspective that there wasn't such a significant market for that. And on the flip side, there are several free open source tools that are available to sort of do this type of analysis. Now, the caveat is that you need to be a trained data scientist or neuroscientist to be able to actually adequately employ those tools. And so we've actually shifted our focus to not specifically looking at research groups, but anyone who's generating brain data. So, for example, EEG device companies, many of which work with pharmaceutical companies, and they have tons of data and they need support with analyzing that data. Or, most lucrative and most interesting for us are pharmaceutical companies that are collecting information on brain function within their clinical trials and then need a tool to better interpret that in a more efficient manner, if that makes sense.
So there are competitors, so to speak, but not directly. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, definitely there are. But since we started, I've been keeping an eye on a number of companies in this area within the neuroscience sphere that have been doing very well. And most of them are based out of the United States, looking at applying software tools towards precision neuroscience. And that's our ultimate goal, really. How can we better understand the human brain to then apply drugs or interventions and then measure what's happening in the brain in response to those medications or interventions. And so I think that there are a number of companies that are out there that do something similar, some of which are more focused on specific indications. One company recently went public and they're focused very much on the psychiatric application of essentially what we're doing. Other companies also sell directly to pharmaceutical entities as well, looking again at other indications, but some of them also have an EEG device. So we're exclusively not a hardware company, but some companies do software, but then they also own these devices or these sort of caps or bands that have electrodes and can measure activity from the human brain. And then in turn, they also do the analytics as well. So we're by no means the only player in this space, but we're definitely unique in the sense that we are singularly focused on analytics and really having the highest quality of analytics and continuing to iterate and improve on our analytical techniques.
So you're barely 3 years on your entrepreneurial path. Where will you be this time next year?
That's a good question. We're very ambitious and we like to think big. And closing on to the first quarter of this year, we're on the trajectory to have very strong partnerships that I think could be very company defining in terms of the magnitude of these potential partners and the revenue potential. So I think that we will be well on our way to continue towards achieving our mission of improving precision neuroscience and continuing to grow the company, both from a business development perspective and from a software development perspective.
So what do you need to get there? So there's the goal. Is it a purely financial equation here or strategic or what do you need?
That's a good question. And I think that the answer is never purely financial in these situations, because I think that not all capital is created equal. And I think that capital solves a lot of problems, but you also need to be careful and strategic with how you deploy that capital and utilize it to grow your business. So yes, I think that we are hoping to continue to raise external capital, but obviously at the same time increase our revenue as well. But I also think that working with strategic partners can help us better iterate on our analytics and our offering as well, because it's actually going to help us internally understand better what the problems are that our clients have, and then see also because we do our market analysis just like any other company does, and we can try to figure out what are the archetypes for who would use this product. But it's very different when you're working directly with them and you can get that direct feedback. We've been fortunate to be able to do that on some scale since we started, but I think that's really what's going to help us get to that point, working with very key strategic partners that allow us to generate revenue, but at the same time, we also continue to grow and build and sort of cement our role within the sector as well in that regard.
You're a very busy person, and as we're chatting, you're actually working at Unity Health, and we're speaking as you're in an exam room because you're currently working. I really
Done for the day.
Okay. So you're just coming off what, a 12-hour shift?
Something like that.
Hi, it's Jim again. When we come back, Nardine and I discuss her entrepreneurial journey, managing uncertainty, and the importance of staying focused. Don't go away. I'm Jim Wilson, and you are listening to NGBI Lab. Hi, it's Jim. I'd like to take a moment to explain the goal of this podcast is to shine a light on up and coming startups in Canadian life sciences. We hope you enjoy learning about the next generation of companies in the sector and the people behind the ideas. We also hope you like what we're doing, and we have a small favor to ask. Please promote us on social with the hashtags NGBI Lab, NGBI Podcasts, and NGBI Summit. On the topic of startups, if you know a startup founder who is working on one of the next great big ideas in Canadian life sciences, please introduce us. My contact information is at the end of today's show, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for your support. Let's get back to our conversation. Has this entrepreneurial journey been kind of what you expected, or did you have something to expect? Like, did somebody take you under their wing and say, look, this is how it's going to go? And by the way, I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I talk about this a lot because I think that there is almost nothing more important to anyone's career or personal development than mentorship and good quality, well-intentioned mentorship, where, as you said, someone takes you under their wing and they say, I want to see this person succeed. And I think that's very important. So, taking a step back, I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea. And frankly, I actually, as you said, I am a very busy person and we're all very busy. And I think that I straddle a very non-traditional sphere. In one aspect, most physicians are not entrepreneurs and most entrepreneurs are not physicians. I mean, there are many physicians that are entrepreneurs and there are many, of the opposite, but it's just in the majority, that's not the case. And I think things are changing now, and particularly in Canada relative to the US in that regard. But yes, it is a very unique line and area to be in. And for myself, actually starting off, I always say that I feel very fortunate that, we started this company in Toronto because there's just so many resources at the University of Toronto that supported us. And through these, we were able to find people that said, I believe in this person and I believe in what they're doing and I believe in this company and I want to support them. And so I've had a handful of key advisors and mentors that I attribute much of our success to. And I will say that there's no shortage of advisors or mentors or people who want to give you their 2 cents. And so you have to be very judicious about, what you pick and what you internalize. But I'm very thankful for that because I think otherwise it would have been a very difficult and uphill battle to go through. And it's not easy because there are some very high highs and low lows of entrepreneurship. And some days you're like, is this going to work? And some days you're like, we're going to be the greatest company in the world. So, and you have to, you have to ride that wave and you have to support your team through those things as well. So I'm grateful on both ends, both to receive mentorship and also to provide mentorship to members of our team as well, so that we can come full circle and try to do our best with what it is that we're doing.
What has been your biggest win so far?
We've had some really good wins, and I think we've been hunting down, certain partnerships that we've been very passionate to close. But I would say our biggest win so far has been success and cohesion of our team. It's just not possible to achieve this level of, I would say, rigor and resilience without a good solid team. And our team is fabulous. We work together very well and are very collegial, which I'm very fortunate for. And I think that we complement each other in many ways, even between myself and my co-founder, which I think is a very intimate relationship in many ways, So I'm very big picture with certain things and she, reminds me of the nitty gritty of other things. And I think to me, that's been our biggest accomplishment. And I'm very proud and grateful for that.
If you could turn back the clock few years, maybe back to your undergraduate years, for those listeners who are still in school and thinking about perhaps following your path, are there any courses you wish you'd taken given this pivot that you've done in your career, which was completely unexpected? Like back when you were doing your undergraduate, now I should have taken that Business 101 course or something.
Well, it's really funny you say that, actually, because I reflected on this a lot and I thought, actually, in medical school, I wish I learned more about commercialization and interfacing, ethically with commercial entities. And actually, because of that passion, about a year and a half ago, I reached out to the Associate Dean of the Faculty of Medicine here at U of T, and I said, I wish I had this course in med school. And I said, can we make one? And he said, sure. And
For
actually,
you.
he supported me, and we worked together in making a course for U of T medical students that just launched this past calendar year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's called the Medical Innovation Technology course, and that's available to medical students and eventually residents as well. And actually, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be hosting our first in-person networking event that's associated with the course. And the beauty of the course, actually, it's very similar to this. We made it in a podcast style. It was in person, and we filmed it at the university, but podcast style format, so that students can sort of listen to it on the go and just learn about what else is out there. And so I really wish I had that. And I'm fortunate that I had the opportunity to contribute towards building this so that other, the next generation of medical students can have a flavor for what else is out there as well.
We talked about the fact that you've had some mentors and they've contributed significantly to your success. Is there any advice that you've been given that has just struck you?
Yeah, it's tough to say because I've gotten a lot of really good advice. I've gotten a lot of not so good advice. And sometimes I give myself good advice, and sometimes I'm like, oh man, I wish I didn't pick that.
That's called being human. Yeah.
Exactly. We're all fallible. Exactly. But, I think probably some of the best advice that I got was to be very, very judicious with your time. And so to be very relentless as much as possible with what you say yes to and what you choose to not take on. And I think you have to be very intentional about that because there's no shortage of stuff that you can do in any area, sector, medicine, entrepreneurship, otherwise. But you sort of have to figure out what your goal is and stay singularly focused on that. And figure out, no pun intended, because this is what our software is intended to do, but filter the signal from the noise, really, because everything else could just be noise and it could really take up your time and your energy. And so I got that advice early on, and I think I've been trying very hard to do that and to really continue to take on things that are going to help us as a company and help me develop as an individual as well, to help do my best for the company and also do my best as a clinician.
I'm very thankful that you've taken some of your valuable time to join us on this podcast. And I can tell you that more than a handful of people over the last few months have been saying, you need to talk to this person and convince her to come on. So again, I know that you're very busy, and thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's my absolute pleasure. And thank you for having me.
That was Dr. Nardin Samuel of Cove Neurosciences in Toronto, Ontario. If you'd like to learn more about Nardin and the work she and her team are doing, please go to coveneuro.com. You can also find them on social at Cove Neuro. If you'd like to learn about this podcast, you can find details at nextgreatbigideas.com. You can also follow us on social at NGBI Podcasts. For details on who I am, please visit jim-wilson.ca, and you can learn about my team at laboccupier.com. You can also follow me on social at laboccupier. This episode was researched by Xenia Pinto and edited by No Limit Marketing. If you'd like to get in touch, email is best. My address is jwilson@leonard, that's LENNARD.com. Thanks very much for listening. See you next time.